Chapter 7, The Hunt Begins. Several large helicopters were landing outside the operations center, depositing more equipment and unloading the 4 guests who were expected from SETI and Langley. Colonel Schmidt greeted their guests, quickly escorting them into the main operations center, which had now become a hive of activity. Out of the corner of her eye she noticed the crews who were clambering up and down the antennas with specialized equipment, looking for clues as to how the antennas could have been moved remotely, as well as looking for any other foreign equipment which may have been placed around the center. Hunter and Stevens had spent the last half hour collecting and poring over printouts of guest names from the log sheets, as well as trace sheets of debit and credit purchases made at the center between 9 a.m. and noon yesterday morning. Stevens finished looking over her list and looked up at Hunter, who was still looking over his printouts. "What do you think we should do with these?" she asked. Hunter thought, smiling to himself. He looked up and nodded to Stevens and caught Colonel Tashima out of the corner of his eye walking in their direction. "Mr. Hunter, Miss Stevens, good morning. What have you got for me?" he asked. "Well, Colonel, there were exactly 147 registered guests at the center yesterday. 106 of them used a debit, Visa, or MasterCard while they were here. That means 41 of them used cash. But we did log in most of them, it seems." Stevens continued looking over the printouts. "Where do you suggest we go with these from here, Colonel Tashima?" she asked. "I've had some of my team set up special computers in another room for you that are uplinked to the Oracle. Follow me, I'll show you." Colonel Tashima led Hunter and Miss Stevens to the other side of the operations center, where the additional computers had all been set up. "These 2 workstations here have been set up to help you search for information on each of the visitors. Since there were only what did you say? 47 guests, that shouldn't take." Tashima glanced over, noticing Hunter and Stevens' puzzled looks. "What?" "Sorry, Colonel, you lost us back there. What is the Oracle?" Hunter asked. "Oracle SI is the same secure personal information database used by the FBI, NSA, and the CIA. It was developed after 9/11. It will help you collect information on all the visitors who came to visit the center. It also has recently been upgraded with some other real nifty features," Colonel Tashima explained. "I have assigned 2 people from my team to assist you. They are trained in Oracle and know how to use the program and special search features built into the program. If you need more people than that, just let me know," he explained. Hunter and Stevens gave each other the same confused expression, but then nodded. "Very well then, good luck. Let's meet up again in an hour, shall we?" Colonel Tashima turned and left the room. Hunter and Stevens sat down at the workstations and looked them over, then looked at each other. "Are you thinking what I'm thinking?" Hunter asked. "I feel like we're prying into people's personal lives, if that's what you mean," Stevens said. "Yeah, something like that, but I guess there's no other way for us to get to the bottom of all this." Hunter looked over at the 2 assistants with a weary eye. "Okay guys, let's get to work." Jimmy came nervously running out of the store, followed immediately by his cousin Seth. Jimmy quickly unzipped his backpack and carefully returned the sphere to its place inside. Jimmy started to get back on his bike and leave when Seth stopped him. "Hey, slow down, Jimmy. Did you hear what that man in the store said about that sphere?" Seth asked. "What did he say?" Leanne and Bobby asked simultaneously. After all, since they had to wait outside alone, they felt that at least they were owed some sort of explanation. "So, tell us, what do you have there, Jimmy?" asked Leanne. Jimmy just sat on his bike, shaking his head back and forth slowly, looking off in the distance. "The man in the store said it looked to him like it was a diamond." Seth whispered, afraid someone else around them might hear. "A diamond!" exclaimed Bobby and Leanne loudly. "Quiet, not so loud." "Yes, a diamond," Seth replied, motioning for the girls to keep their voice down. "Well, Jimmy, you better get that back to Grandpa JJ, because he probably doesn't even know it's a diamond, if that's really what it is," wondered Leanne. "Wait, that's not all," exclaimed Seth. "There's something else that's weird about that sphere, Jimmy. Did you see what happened when the man shined his laser beam into it?" he said. "All the electricity went out in the store." Seth looked over at the girls. Did you two notice anything strange happen while we were in the store? He asked Bobby. Well, now that you mentioned it, we did notice the store went dark while you two were inside, answered Bobby. And we heard lots of honking from the cars over by the intersection over there, said Leanne, pointing in the direction of the street. Suddenly, they heard the front door open to the gem store and saw a tall man step out looking around. Hey, you kids, come on back inside the store, asked the tall man, who turned his head around and stuck it inside the store. Hey Sam, those kids you were talking about, they're right out here, he shouted, then turned and looked at Jimmy. Son, you want to sell that rock of yours? Bring it on back inside and we'll make you an offer for it. It was one of the men who had been in the store watching the baseball game. Jimmy thought it might be Sam's partner that he talked about. Perhaps he was startled by the man, or maybe it was out of fear, but either way, Jimmy had no desire to go inside or take the man up on his offer. He jumped up on his bike and took off as fast as he could towards the river, leaving Seth, Bobby, and Leanne to deal with the man from the store without him. No thank you sir, replied Seth hesitantly. We have to get back home and take the rock back to our grandpa, but thanks anyway, we'll let him know about your offer. Seth yelled to the man as they all jumped back onto their bikes and hurriedly pedaled off to catch up with Jimmy. When the three of them finally caught up with Jimmy, he was nearly to the river. Jimmy never realized he could pedal so fast, but the effort was finally catching up with him. It was time to stop and rest. As he approached the end of the road, he saw a good spot to stop his bike near a small shade tree. The others were pedaling close behind him. About time you stopped, we've been yelling at you to stop for the last 10 minutes, protested Leanne, trying to catch her breath. What did you think you were doing? I was afraid that they were going to try and take the sphere away. Jimmy answered, taking off his backpack and reaching in for a bottle of water. Leanne sat up on her bicycle and gave her brother a stern look. As soon as we get back to Uncle Rodney's and Aunt Marlene's house, you've got to tell Grandpa JJ and Dad about that, she pointed to his backpack. That thing. And if you don't, I will, she hollered, turning her bike around to join up with Seth and Bobby, who had already parked in the shade near the side of the river. Hunter and Stevens had spent the last hour going over all the names on their list and entering them into the Oracle database. It seemed that several names were immediately dismissed as low-priority suspects, according to the Oracle database search program. Whatever the results would be, Hunter was both impressed as well as disturbed that his government had such power at its disposal to wield. As he and Stevens finished entering all the visitors' names on the list, and the relative search data necessary, several names came up highlighted on his screen. Wow, this is incredible, Alice, don't you think? I wonder if they'd mind if I looked up some of my old girlfriends on this thing. Hunter added jokingly. I don't think they would like that at all, no, I'm sure of it. Stevens added. Well, let's see what we have here. Hunter looked over the names coming up on his computer screen. It seems Oracle has narrowed our list of over 100 names down to 22 high-priority names. Hunter observed. He silently read through the list of names. Apparently, the names on the high-priority list were chosen for their educational background, previous military experience, citizenship status, criminal records, and so on. One set of names came to the top of Hunter's list immediately. You found anything yet, Hunter? Stevens asked. It would seem so, Hunter mumbled, as he read the first 3 names. 3 names just popped up on my screen, all with the same last names too, must be brothers, cousins or something. Hunter continued. Let's see, we've got an Alex, Rodney, and Jim Thompson. Apparently one of them, Rodney Thompson, lives close to here. Hunter began printing out the list from Oracle for Colonel Tashima. Now, to find Colonel Tashima, and find out what he wants to do next. Hunter thought. I wonder if the kids are having fun, Marlene asked Rodney, looking over the radio for any explanation to its strange behavior earlier that morning. I'm sure they are just fine, honey, said Rodney. I was thinking about taking them fishing down at the lake later on today, around sunset. Were you planning on heading back in the morning, Alex? Rodney asked. I think so. I need to talk to Dr. Forster first before taking Pop back to Prescott with us. Alex paused. I got to tell you though, I am still a little concerned about his state of mind. Where is he, by the way? Asked Rodney, looking at Marlene. He's upstairs watching the baseball game, said Marlene. I'm going back up there in a minute to check on Nicole, then I'll check on Grandpa JJ while I am up there. Marlene turned and started to leave. I think I'll call the kids and see how they are doing. Oh, and by the way, lunch will be ready in about an hour. Marlene walked out the door to the workshop, leaving Alex and Rodney to continue with their examination of the radio. Tell me, Rod, what do you think caused this radio to act up this morning? I've worked on lots of radios before, but I have never seen anything like that happen, said Alex, scratching his head, as he crouched down to get a closer look at the radio. I don't know, maybe we picked up a signal from one of the stations in Albuquerque doing a nostalgia show or something. That's my guess, suggested Rodney. Well, I don't know about any nostalgia shows or stations, but I do know this, Jimmy and I weren't trying to play a joke on you two, that's for sure, said Grandpa JJ, who had just walked quietly in and was standing behind Rodney and Alex. Hey Pop, didn't hear you come in, said Alex, standing up and looking back at the radio. We've been checking this thing out for the last hour and haven't found anything unusual. In fact, we turned it on again and all we got was static. No stations at all. I think the tuner is bad, offered Grandpa JJ, glancing over at Alex and Rodney, who had stunned looks on their faces. You two seem to have forgotten how many radios I've worked on. Suddenly there was a knock on the door to the workshop and the three men ended their conversation and turned to see Marlene standing in the doorway with an anxious look on her face. Alex, there are 2 FBI agents standing at our front door and they are asking to speak with you, said Marlene, giving the 3 men a worried look. Did they say what they wanted? Rodney asked. Marlene shook her head. Rodney shot Alex a puzzled look, shrugging his shoulders. Thanks, Marlene, tell them I'll be right there, Alex said. So, Jimmy, what is it about this sphere that has you afraid of telling anyone about it, and what is it made out of? Bobby asked. The 4 of them had finally reached the side of the river. Seth and Leanne were keeping themselves busy looking for crawdads in the water. Bobby and Jimmy were following close behind. Leanne had taken her shoes and socks off to play around in the cool water. Although it was mid-April and the outside temperature had started to finally warm up, the water of the river was quite chilly. Leanne had stopped suddenly when she saw her first crawdad crawling in the shallows of the riverbank surrounded by various trees and bushes. Jimmy turned to watch Leanne and Seth for a moment, and then looked back at Bobby. It does things, he said softly. Bobby gave him a perplexed look. It does things, she asked cynically. Like what? What do you mean? Bobby gave Jimmy a look of confusion. Jimmy walked over to his bike and reached into his backpack for the sphere. He pulled it out and holding it tightly, he walked back over to where the others were standing. Jimmy turned slowly to face a skeptical Bobby, slowly opening his hands towards the sun to reveal the sphere. That's weird, Jimmy thought. He held his hands up for a few seconds longer, still nothing happened. For a few moments Jimmy stood there, staring blankly at the sphere. What do you think you are doing now? Bobby asked. Jimmy was silent, staring at the sphere in his hands with disbelief. Maybe it is all in my mind, he thought. Damn. He mumbled, and took hold of the sphere, gripping it tightly like a baseball in his hands. Bobby started to giggle. By this time, Leanne and Seth had stopped what they were doing to watch Jimmy. Were you expecting it to do something, Jimmy? She asked, still giggling. Jimmy swung his right hand behind his head and threw the sphere as hard as he could toward the river. On a normal day, Jimmy could throw a baseball quite a distance. In summer league teams, Jimmy usually got picked for the outfield positions due to his strong right hand and ability to throw the ball accurately. Today, however, was quite different. They all watched as the sphere floated effortlessly from the palm of his hand. The sphere floated out over the river and then stopped, hovering motionless in the air. As it hovered, it sparkled magnificently in the sun, catching the rays of light and reflecting them in all directions, creating a rainbow-like effect. For a few seconds, nothing else happened. Leanne had started to yell something to Jimmy when there was a loud explosive sound, like the sound of a diver hitting the pool from the highest dive board. Streams of water shot straight up into the air all around the four of them, drenching the four of them as the streams of water came down from high up above. There was a moment of silence, followed by a roar of laughter from Seth, Leanne, and Bobby. At first, Jimmy just continued staring at the sphere, and then he too joined in, loudly laughing himself. Once the mist from the shower had subsided, the four of them could see the sphere still floating over the water. "Wow, Jimmy, that was cool. Can you make it do that again?" Seth yelled. Leanne and Seth ran from where they were standing to get a closer look at the sphere. As the four continued to watch, the sphere floated back to where Jimmy was and then positioned itself in the air, above where the four of them now stood. The sky, which had been a perfectly cloudless blue, now grew dark as night, and the view of land surrounding them suddenly disappeared, leaving just the four of them standing alone on sandy ground. No one moved. "Jimmy, what is happening?" Leanne asked nervously. "What did you do?" Leanne looked down at her legs and at her arms and hands, which still seemed to be normal, even if everything else around her wasn't. "Like I've been telling you, it wasn't me, it's the sphere." Jimmy tried to explain. "Though, it's never done anything like that before." Alex opened the front door and saw two men standing on the other side of the screen. One looked to be in his late 20s with a mustache, short brown hair, and muscular build, while the other agent looked somewhat older, Hispanic with salt and pepper hair and medium build. "Hello, are you Alex Boyce Thompson, who lives in Prescott, Arizona?" asked the younger agent who's standing closest to the door. "Yes, sir," replied a slightly nervous Alex. "Is there something I can help you with?" Alex looked and could see the two agents holding their FBI badges up towards the door. "Oh God, what could be wrong now? Are my kids in trouble?" he wondered. "Good morning, Mr. Thompson. I'm Agent Bob Owens and this is my partner, Agent Joel Pacheco. We are with the FBI. We're here following up on an incident that occurred yesterday morning at the Very Large Array." Owens paused and looked at a notepad he was holding. "You and your family were visiting there yesterday, is that correct?" Agent Owens asked. "Yes, as a matter of fact we were. I took my two kids, my granddad, my brother and his two kids to visit the array yesterday," Alex replied. Then Rodney decided to add to that. "Yeah, in fact we were thinking about visiting the gift shop too. Then we heard all these alarms going off and they told us the center was closing down for the day, and we had to leave," said Rodney. "I see. Well, sir, we are following up with everyone who visited the center yesterday, to see if anyone might have noticed anything unusual going on while they were there at the center. Unusual, such as, maybe someone using a cell phone, laptop computer or other such device, anything that might have looked suspicious or out of the ordinary?" Agent Pacheco asked. By this time, Grandpa JJ had also stepped up behind Alex and was tuned into the conversation. Alex looked back at the two of them who were both shaking their heads. "No, sir, I can't say we saw anything like that. We know that cell phone use is discouraged near the center. There were signs all around that warned us about the interference they could cause, so we turned ours off." Alex explained. "What happened? Was anyone hurt?" "Well, sir, we aren't really at liberty to disclose the nature of the incident, but we can tell you that nobody was hurt," Pacheco explained, as Owens was busy taking notes on a small notepad. The two agents looked briefly at each other and nodded. "Well, Mr. Thompson, we're sorry to have bothered you." Pacheco apologized, and then continued. "Please excuse us if we interrupted your morning. If you think of something later that you might have seen, please don't hesitate to give us a call. Here is my card, and that number on the bottom is my extension. If you think of something, anything at all, please call that number. It is very important." Pacheco smiled and handed Alex a card, and the two men turned and left. Alex watched the two as they left, then gently closed the front door. He turned around and saw four very perplexed expressions standing before him. "What the hell was that all about?" asked Grandpa JJ, breaking the silence. I don't know, Pop, but I do know one thing, Marlene. Call the kids and tell them we'll be down to pick them up in a few minutes. We're going fishing, said Rodney.
You've been listening to The Thompson Sphere by David E. Farmer, also now available on Amazon's Kindle. Hope you enjoyed this. Stay tuned for more chapters coming soon. Have a great day. Bye-bye.